What's up, everybody? I am back with another informative style video, and today's tip is not just good for collectors, but also people that may sell or trade factory sealed disc-based games. And we're going to be specifically talking about when you receive a sealed game and the disc has come loose from its spindle inside and it's just rattling around inside the case. Now, there are a few videos on YouTube that do talk about this issue, but they all only talk about when you get a PS4 game that has a loose disc in it. And there's a couple reasons why. The first reason is the PS4 game cases are definitely the most common to have this problem, and it's just, unfortunately, the way that they're designed. They're kind of flexible, and the spindle inside doesn't really hold the disc on very well. The other reason is a lot of these videos seem to have gone up about 3 years ago, and that was like right when limited run games and some of these other like limited style companies were becoming really popular. And unfortunately, these companies have to ship their games. The discs come loose in shipping a lot of times, and people were like, hey, here's an issue that we can solve by doing this simple little trick, and it works great for the PS4 games that you're ordering from like Limited Run and some of these other companies. Only problem is the tip that those videos show does not work on other types of game cases for other systems. The spindles are different in them, and it sometimes doesn't even work on the PS4 games. So I'm going to cover both different ways to get a disc back on the spindle for PS4 games, but also how to put it on the spindle for other systems if you don't want to open the sealed game. First, I'm going to show you the technique that I mentioned was in those videos from a few years ago, and that is when you have a sealed PS4 game with a loose disc inside. And now obviously I'm doing this on an open game so I can show you details and stuff, but pretend now this is sealed, and the first thing you have to do is find like this sweet spot where the disc is just sitting on top of the spindle loosely, like that. It's not jumping all around. And then you would lay it on top of like a table, floor, just a flat surface. I'm using this board so I can show you better. And then what you do is you would take your finger, you would go to the middle of the game case, and then up to the right about 1 inch and press down. And then that would pop the disc back onto the spindle just like that. And that works most of the time. Now, unfortunately, not every PS4 game would come with no manual like this, especially ones that are like a part of a collector's edition or like a special limited run type of game. Sometimes they'll have maps or posters or big thick manuals. And I have gotten in the past a loose disc to go back on the spindle in a game like that has a big thick manual, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes I have to use a different method, and that other method I will show you in a little bit because it also pertains to these other games for different systems that one little corner press does not work on. I mentioned at the beginning of this video that the PS4 game cases are the most likely to have this issue, but over the years I have gotten sealed games for many different systems that have had a loose disc inside. PS2, PS3, 360, Wii. It can happen with all of them. Now, the biggest difference between the PS4 games and the reason why the discs come off so easily and say like this Wii or 360 case is that spindle in there. And with these, the spindle is like a little quadrant. It's 4 little sections, and it's the same on this 360 game. Now, that doesn't mean that every Wii case is going to look just like this one or like this 360 case. Sometimes you'll get ones that don't have a solid backing to the case. They'll be like strips of plastic with literally just nothing except for the paper insert and the outer thin layer plastic protecting itself. So you have to make sure you're kind of feeling around, seeing what type of case it is, so you don't damage it when putting a disc back on. Now, we're going to do this Wii game first. Now, to give you an idea, I'm going to put the disc just loosely on top, so we don't have to do that like rattling around thing, wasting time. And we're going to try that technique that we did on the PS4 game by just going to the middle, moving your finger up and pressing down. And unfortunately, it didn't work. The disc comes right out. And that is because of the spindle inside, the way it works. That technique, unfortunately, is not going to pop the disc back on. So what you have to do is lay it down on a flat surface just like this and kind of press in 4 different spots, not just one, to make sure that the disc actually goes back onto all of those little quadrants inside. And as you can see, the disc is now secure. That will work. That technique of just laying it down flat and pushing on it will work most of the time as well. We'll go ahead and do it real quick on this 360 game. I'm going to put it loosely on top. And same thing, we'll do this one upside down just for the hell of it. And we're going to press down lightly, and it just snapped it right back on. You can hear the click. and it's on there nice and secure. There's one more technique that you can use if all else fails. If the ways we've already shown do not work and you're struggling to get the disc to actually stay onto the spindle, and that is to actually hold the game in your hands and do the method. And that is a little bit more tricky. I'm going to use this Xbox One game case because it is just the last one that I haven't used yet. And we're going to put the disc loosely on top, close it up, and we're going to hold it in our hands by putting the disc right along where your fingers and your palm of your hands meet on both sides like this. And then your fingers are going to push up on the case from underneath. And this is where the different versions of cases comes into play. You got to make sure that you're actually pushing on case, not that empty space that could be between where you're just going to be pushing on the actual like cover art insert, because you don't want to rip or tear the cover art, and you also don't want to push too far in the middle like on the spindle, because the spindle can have sharp little edges that can stab up through on the cover art on the other side. So with the disc sitting on top of the spindle and it in our hands like this, we're going to push up with our fingers on the bottom. As we push down, again, not in the middle but right off to the sides like this, up and then down, and then that would pop the disc right back on the spindle just like that. Now again, that method is only really reserved where if you can't get the disc back on using those other techniques, maybe because again there's a big thick map, poster, booklet, whatever inside, and you just need that little bit extra like leverage of the pushing up from underneath while pushing down. Again, be very careful when doing that because it could possibly cause damage to the cover art. That is just a last-ditch effort. Be careful when doing it. I want to mention that there are a few scenarios where these techniques are not going to work. One is if the actual spindle inside is broken, either if it's like cracked or literally shattered and you hear pieces of plastic rattling around inside, clearly you're not going to be able to put the disc back onto that. The other is if you're talking about a loose disc inside like a PS1, a Sega Dreamcast, or like a Saturn case, there's no way to push up or down on the case enough without cracking it to get the disc to go back on the spindle. And before someone asks, GameCube, technically I could see maybe you being able to put a loose disc back on the spindle, but those cases are so thick, especially around where the disc goes, it would be very hard to get the right amount of pressure to pop it back down on there. So maybe, but probably not. Another thing I want to mention is, you know, like, this is not just something for someone that is collecting sealed games. Again, if you're someone selling or trading games, having the sealed game that you're trying to get rid of, it's a lot better if the disc isn't rattling around inside. So when the person receives it, or you have to try to explain to them, yeah, it's sealed, but it's all loose. It's better if it's, you know, actually on the spindle. And while PS4, like an Xbox One games, they are on Blu Ray style discs that are like scratch resistant. 360 and like Wii games are not. So to get that disc back on the spindle means less chances of it bumping around, getting scratched up inside the game case. No one wants that, because if there's someone that is buying it, a sealed one, and then plans on opening it, you know, hopefully you can save it from at least getting more scratched if it already has from being loose in the case. That's it, everybody. Thank you for watching. Please leave a comment. Maybe let me know if you have an idea for another video like this one that would be informative about a topic that hasn't been talked about already a million times in YouTube videos. Also, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, hit the little bell, notification icon, all those things. Thank you again. Love ya. Peace.